International Women's Day. It's an exciting day. It's a time for reflection for some, not necessarily for those on the call. So I hope you have had less cupcakes and more robust discussions. And, you know, I wanted to say a big warm welcome to everybody. I'm Lycia Heath, CEO of Women for Election, and to say a big thank you to Madeleine for joining us today from Tasmania, for giving up her time on a very busy, committed day as well. So thank you so much, Madeleine, for joining us.
Pleasure.
I am going to pass over to my colleague, Carly Goldstone, to do this interview, but I'll be here throughout, and we'll be monitoring questions in the chat. And also we should be able to have some open mic questions as well. So Carly, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to this very special Conversations on International Women's Day with Minister Madeleine Ogilvy. Thank you, Madeleine, for so generously sharing your time and expertise with us on such an auspicious day. I would first like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from the traditional lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. I honour and acknowledge the strength and resilience of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women, with whom I stand in solidarity, and acknowledge that sovereignty of this land was never ceded. You are welcome to tell us in the chat what traditional lands you are zooming in from. As we've spoken about, it's International Women's Day, and interestingly, the official theme for IWD 2023 is cracking the code, innovation for a gender-equal future. So I think it's quite apt that we have the captivating Madeleine with us today, who is currently the Tasmanian Minister for Science and Technology. Madeleine is passionate about technology, communications, and really interestingly, our emerging space industry, and has led the development of Tasmania's engagement in the space sector. She's also the Minister of Defence, Industries, Advanced Manufacturing, Small Business, Heritage and Racing.
Everything.
Everything. And having worked in France, Indonesia and the US in Silicon Valley, Madeleine has broad international commercial experience. She's held numerous board positions and has extensive experience as a lawyer with particular expertise in intellectual property law. Now, Madeleine's political career is particularly interesting as she has represented the Labor Party and the Liberal Party as an MP, which she currently is, and has also been an independent MP. So if you have any questions as the conversation progresses, please put them in the chat and I'll leave time at the end of the session to ask Madeleine. So I thought we'll get started with the first question and the conversation.
Sure.
So I wanted to, before we talk about your experience as an MP, I'd like to discuss the lead up to you first getting elected in 2014 as a Labor MP in Tasmania. Would you say you were always interested in politics? Did you have experience in politics before you decided to run? What made you want to get involved?
So it's a really sort of an interesting story that has a trajectory that went over about a decade. I'll summarise it for you, but I was living in Sydney and I had had a big international career. It's a real women's story, so I hope everybody enjoys it today. I'd had a big international career with my husband, who's an Irish engineer. We'd travelled the world, lots of fun before children. And I'd ended up in a very senior role in Telstra Corporation as a general manager, one of the few senior executive women. And their corporation was amazing. And they were very much into promoting women as a male-dominated industry as well. They were very aware that they were trying to even the playing field. So I'd had a really great experience there, but I'd gone off to have my first child. And it was during a federal Liberal government, and there was a problem with capped childcare. So I was living in Sydney. There was a cap on childcare availability. And so what happened for me as somebody who didn't have relatives in Sydney, had an Irish husband, he didn't have relatives there either, with a senior executive role with a first baby, it was just so hard. And I got a bit cross about it because I just felt like I'd done the hard yards with my career. You know, I was 15, 20 years in. I'd reached that senior level. I'd gone off to have children. My company were really supportive of that and wanted me to come back and do more. It was a good exemplar for the business, but I just couldn't get childcare that was available, affordable, and I felt safe. So I just felt it was really unfair, and that it was a political setting that was discriminatory towards women and working mothers and people at that stage of their career. So that got me really engaged in the political side of things, and that's when I joined the Labor Party in New South Wales. And the other driving force that was happening at the same time, and this sort of goes to my big heart in politics, we had the Tampa crisis. And I was very engaged with the refugee sector. I think anybody with a heart at that time was really quite horrified that we had these families, these children, these people on a ship who I think a lot of Australia thought we weren't handling that in a way we might want to. So I got activated and joined the party in Sydney. But as it transpired, I didn't end up finding childcare in Sydney. So I came home to Tasmania, where we were welcomed with open arms as a young family coming back. And the company was great. They transferred both of us here. So we brought our jobs with us, which was really helpful. And then I went on to have more children and opened up my legal practice, which was the way I sort of flexed out of that full-time work into something that I could manage a bit more here. And then politics unfolded and the conversations happened, and I ended up running. I ran in, I think, in the 2010 election, was not successful, and after that swore I would never do it again, as everybody does, but then the opportunity came around again in 2014, and that's how it started.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think we find a lot of women who enter Parliament have had very successful and interesting careers.
Yeah,
don't necessarily start through the normal way we've been seeing, let's say, in the last decade or so.
No. So I'd certainly come from outside the political realm, from the private sector, and I felt also the economy wasn't great then, and there was a lot of need. So I was a commercial lawyer, a lot of need to help businesses and people who were losing their businesses and losing their houses, and it was really hard times. And I do feel that politics is a community service, that it's about at the stage of your career you're at, putting back into your own community and trying to take a leadership position where you can to help people. So I'm very much into the grassroots side of politics, working at that level with real people with real problems. Yes. And that's the bit I really, really enjoy doing.
We love that. We love that here at Women for Election.
That's okay.
Why we do what we do. We need to see more women with diverse and real lived experience.
Right. Yeah.
And making legislation and making policy that affects people on a day-to-day basis.
That's right. So I raise my voice on those issues as much as I can. And, there'll be legislation or issues coming through that you don't think would even need a woman's voice raised, but invariably there is. And people just don't think of things, even simple things like transportation and the times that buses leave and come and things like that. Actually, it does matter. You've got to get the kids to school if you're using the bus to do your shopping, if you're an older woman. So there's always a need for a female perspective, no matter what you're doing in life. Yes. And I would just give a compliment to my Liberal team. They listen. So that's good. And I know in politics, there is always work to be done across every sector. But I do feel that there is a real focus on women in politics now that is really helpful. And what I would like to see is a celebration of the full diversity of women across the political spectrum.
I agree.
We need all of that as well.
We need all of that, exactly.
Yeah.
I wanted to take you back a little bit. I know your grandfather, Ogilvy, I'm sorry, was a member for Wilmot. Is how you initially became interested in running for the Labor Party in the 70s?
Yeah. So family history.
So were you approached to run? Did you put your hand up? How did it actually play out?
It's hard to remember now, but I think what happened was I transferred my membership from New South Wales to Tasmania and just got engaged and involved. And what I should do, and this might be interesting for a national audience, we have the Hare Clark system here in Tasmania. It's quite different to everywhere other than the ACT. And what it means is you run multiple candidates for a seat, and there are multi-member electorates. So in my electorate of Clark, there are 5 seats, and each party and independents will run, and you could have up to 30 people competing for those 5 seats. So parties are always looking, there's pros and cons to it, but parties are always looking for lots of people to run. The benefit of it is you get that experience early. It's quite cheap to do it early, so it's great for women. And in my electorate at the moment in Clark, all of those 5 seats are held by women. So I do feel, yeah, it's good. So I do feel that there's something beneficial about our system. Having said that, it's really hard to win a seat. So I'm pretty sure they asked me to run thinking, well, we'll just give her a go and see what happens that first time. And then, of course, once you've run in a campaign and you see what it takes, the organising, the money, the people, and putting yourself out there in a way, branding yourself as where you sit on the political spectrum. Some people say once is enough. And I must admit, I did too. But then they asked me to run again. And I thought, I'm mid-career professional. I'm a 5th generation Tasmanian. It's in the DNA with the grandparents. I think I will try again. So I ran a very short and sharp campaign, which was successful. But perhaps I could tell you a little story, which is a really nice story for International Women's Day as well. So as part of that campaign, I have my campaign vehicle, which is a 1964 VW Beetle, we call her Dorothy. She's fantastic. It's all very female, and I play Blondie in it. It's great fun. And I was campaigning, driving along just before the election. My earphone thing in the phone rings, and there's a very British voice on the other end of the phone saying, Madeleine, this is Jamie from the BBC. We've been doing some research on your family, and we found some records in a house. We run that show, Secret Streets of London. You might be familiar with it. We'd like to do a story on your family. And I, of course, being very, very cynical by this stage, thought, that's probably a local radio station. So I'll just be really careful in this conversation. So I said, well, Jamie from the BBC, interesting, but no, my people are from Scotland and Ireland, and we know the history. He said, we're certain. We've looked up your grandfather and your great uncle, who you've mentioned, and they were sons of convicts. And I said, well, that's true. I said, look, I'm too busy right now. I've got to win this election. I have to go. So Jamie, I tell you, I'll do a deal with you. If I win the election, I'll do your show. And then completely forgot about it, thinking I wouldn't win. Sadly, I won, and the very next day they were back on the phone. Hello, are you ready to talk about your convict history? Okay, so we did the show, and I kept asking. They came out to Tasmania. It was a whole convict story, and they wouldn't tell me exactly what these ancestors had done because they wanted the big reveal moment. And finally, we got to the reveal moment, and it turned out that my ancestors were 3 girls, 15, 14, and 13, sisters, who ran a gang of female pickpockets in London. And they were expert thieves. And what they would do is sell their ill-gotten gains, put 20% of their funds aside for lawyers. It's like, this is starting to sound a bit familiar. For barristers to keep them out of jail, which they did very successfully for a long time. And when the long arm of the law finally caught up with them, they were put on a barge in the Thames in London, where one Charles Dickens, who was a journalist at the Times, happened to come across them and interviewed them. And the interview was about time to change the British way of punishing people for the crime of being poor by shipping them off to Tasmania. So we finally got to the big reveal moment where I said, well, what did they do? Because if it's awful, my new political career will be over. And they told me. So the girls were experts at stealing high-end fashion accessories. And I just felt I knew they were my women at that point. So hats, gloves, shoes. And I thought, well, there you go. So this is part of the family DNA that you're smart enough to know how to stay out of trouble, you know your way around the courts. And then over time, the descendants of those girls here became the Premier and Attorney General of Tasmania. And then in New South Wales, the one who went there, her descendant is a Supreme Court judge.
Oh,
there you go.
Incredible. What a story.
Great Women's Day story, right?
What a great Women's Day story. What also leads us perfectly into the next question, which I know that I'm personally very interested in this, and I imagine many women on the call would be.
Yeah.
You have a really particularly interesting political career. You started as a Labor Party member, and we now know your, the generational history of Labor, the red blood in your veins.
Yep.
Then you became an independent.
Yep.
And then you are now sitting as a Liberal MP.
Won a seat as Liberal. Yes.
So I would like to know,
true.
Can you talk us through these transformations in your political affiliations and
sure.
And what made you make such a political shift? Because you've literally gone from that side into the middle to the right.
Yes. So I'll talk you through it, but I would say I've just stayed in the middle and that things have shifted around me. And I say that because that does happen, and political parties and movements do shift and move. So I've recently been over in the States, and they're having a big conversation there around the social contract and about the impact of social media and the bell jar that we put over people, and how we all feel quite fragmented now. Whereas what I think we need to talk about is how, as individuals and whole people, we can sit right across a spectrum of ideas, and we should be able to engage with all of those sensibly. So my argument is I've stayed in the middle and everybody else has moved around me, because parties are just made of people. And depending on who's in the party and who's leading it and who's in charge, it can shift policy to the more to the left or more to the right. And I've gotten stronger about this argument, because I now know that I was elected by the same people as a Labor person and basically by the same people as a Liberal person. So I'm pretty sure they're voting for me, which is really nice. But I would also say, as you move through life, it has been my experience, particularly with children and mortgages, that my more lefty leanings of my youth at university don't stack up when I've got a mortgage to pay in the same way as they may have in the old days. So I think there is a journey that we go on as people through our life stages. And when you're like me, in charge of raising 3 children and school fees and all the rest of it, that economic side comes more to the fore. So that's why I feel like I'm in a really good position with my team and my party now. Makes sense to me to be where I am. And then from a female side, I think also you would have seen the Liberals are out and about talking loudly about re-engaging with women. That needs to happen. So you either in life decide to, let somebody else do the hard work or step up. And I think you're seeing some of that stepping up happening now with the Libs. And so with all parties and all people, there are opportunities. But I think we may almost after pandemic need a bit of a step change in women's engagement with politics more generally. It's this idea of the social contract that America's rethinking. I think we as women need to really rethink how we engage with parties and politics, because we're 50% of the population, and yet the structures in politics are still, that Westminster system and the old style, the late sittings, the aggressive behaviour, all of that is really quite a male frame of reference. So I don't know if that helps, but I think I'm sort of been staying in the centre.
Yes, no, definitely. I think it's very true. I think, political parties do change over time. Ideologies shift. You can see that very readily in the Liberal Party at the moment.
Yeah.
And we talk about the barriers for women in our equip class all the time, the barriers for women who want to run, and some of them are cash, some of them are confidence, it's access. There are many different reasons, and that's why we've created the equip program. It's why we exist in the first place. Because we don't want these burdens and these obstacles to be seen as a way to prevent women from having a voice and having a seat at the table.
So absolutely.
I did want to ask you a bit further on this point. Has it affected your relationships in Parliament? Because I know that, within party structures, it becomes like a team sport.
It is a team sport, yeah.
Right? So how has that affected your relationships? I don't really, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't doubt that no one minded you becoming an independent, but moving from Labor to Liberal is quite a massive jump.
Yeah.
And how did that affect your relationships?
Yeah, so I'm very, I've got a bit of a rules of the road about how I do politics, which has helped me survive for a decade in what is a pretty, tough gig. And one of them, this comes from my dad and family line, one of them is to never attack people personally. So I just don't do that. That's not a thing I do. I would really urge your young people to take that on board. If you can't win your argument based on policy and logic and good sense, you're not going to win it by attacking somebody personally and name calling. So that's not something I do or did, and that helps a lot. Secondly, when I left Labor, I just gently closed the door. That's it. You do that, and I think that's a professional thing to do. When you leave a job, you don't do anything other than say, thank you, it's great, worked out, didn't work out, time for a change. You gently close the door. So I don't hold grudges. It's hard to do. I don't hold grudges. I don't attack people. And I'm really quite obsessed with getting electoral wins for Tasmania, which is why the space sector is so great. As far as relationships go, we have a very small parliament. So we're a parliament of 25 people. We sit really close to each other. We can see each other. We've all known each other a long time. Doesn't stop the robust debate. But in the main, I have to say it's been pretty well balanced. So I think that's, I try and very much be an adult about it. But I do say, and I'm quite bolshy about this, to women out there, never be afraid to make a change. It is okay to make a change.
Hello, have we lost Madeleine?
You're in a relationship or that's not working for you, it's okay to make a change.
I think that's a wonderful point, Madeleine. And I think women who come to our courses, some of them are very clear about where they stand politically, but others are trying to find their feet. And that's a really, it's to say you can enter as this, things might change and you can transform your political career, you can shift your alliances.
Life's not static.
Life's not static. And we see that in federal parliament all the time. Julia Bunce, who crossed the floor. We've got right now and Lydia Thorpe, who's just left the Greens. So
I saw that.
So it happens all the time, and it's good for our alum to hear that there's movement, there's change, there's fluidity. Nothing is stuck, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, you are a minister that holds many, many portfolios.
Oh, I know, right?
Oh my God. You're the Minister for Science and Technology, Defence Industries and Advanced Manufacturing, Small Business, Heritage Racing. And I know that you're very passionate about growing Tasmania's economy and tech sector.
I am, yeah.
So what's it like to lead so many different portfolios?
Yeah.
And unexpected experiences and or connections have emerged from your leadership?
So again, I think I was really fortunate because I'd had a bit of a corporate career first. So I'd come in from business and major projects and Telstra Land, telecommunications, and I'd had some good practical experience in running divisions. So what I've tried to do, because there are a lot and they're mostly similar sorts of people and sectors, but there's a lot to get across. So I've set my office up in a bit of a corporate way with myself, my chief of staff, and then very trusted and excellent staff who run each of those portfolio areas. And this is the other tip I'd say, don't be a micromanager. I'm not a micromanager. You cannot operate if you don't have complete faith and trust in your staff. So we run it how we run it. They bring me the good stuff and the really bad stuff. Everything else they do themselves. And so that's worked out. But I am really, really excited about the space industry development, which we've been working on for over a decade, and it is an entirely new sector for Tasmania. And the reason it sort of gets attention and it's got funding and people are coming in, most people think, oh, what could Tasmania have to do with space? So what we have is really good geography. We have a university that specialises in radio telescopes, and companies working here with the university that do a thing called space situational awareness. And what that means is we can see the space junk, we can find the space junk, we can know where all of the satellites are at any given time, and we can do that when things are dark in the Northern Hemisphere. So the satellites go around the globe and we pick them up as they're coming over Tasmania. So we have this specialist niche that's really to do with our geography, and it's a clean, green industry that's high tech and very well paid jobs in it, which is great. And so we've gone from back in 2014, zero commercialisation, to now where we are the leaders in Australia in this, and we've got multinational companies coming to work with that with
amazing.
us.
That's incredible.
So that's my big legacy. I'm really proud of that.
Oh, that is something to be very proud of, and something that will sustain Australia for a long time in the future, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
So this also leads perfectly into our next question. Licia talks about this a lot, that we're, as Australians, we're very, very well informed about the negatives of going into politics, the obstacles and the misogyny that particularly women can face. But I would love to know the positives that you've experienced. How has your involvement in politics provided benefits for your community?
Yeah, fantastic. That's a great question. I absolutely love my job. I just love it. It's the best job in the world. And I think once you get there, it's fantastic. I've got the best team. The Liberal Party here is amazing. They're great people. I just couldn't be happier with my scenario. And to be in a role where I can make an actual real difference to people's everyday lives is really the best thing ever. And I come from a background as a lawyer, so I'm always wanting to be on the helpful side anyway. But now I can drive policy that helps real people. So as an example, say from small business perspective, how do you weather the pandemic? And how do I keep those businesses and families alive so that everybody thrives and the kids can go to school and people can pay the mortgages? So these real life challenges are weighty and meaty and meaningful, and they matter to families. At the end of the day, I'm a real family person. I've got 3 kids, a dog and a husband. I've got everything going on. And I'm living that family experience of, electricity bills or mortgage payments, get to work, get the kids to school. So my International Women's Day this morning was driving kids to school. That was what I did in the morning because I'm a mum. So, and that's why it's so nice to be on this call as well. So I guess that kind of stuff is really meaningful. Then there's other really practical things like when I got the road fixed, it was life-changing for everybody who needed a road that they weren't going to fall off. And people still stop me in the street and go, oh, thank you for fixing Davey Street. So there's some really, really practical things there too. Yeah. But I would really encourage, and I didn't have the confidence for a long time. It took a lot for me to put my hand up to run, but I would encourage women, all of your people, to have a go, just have a go. What's the worst that can happen? You lose, oh well, worst things will happen in life by the time you reach the end. Have a go, get engaged, be engaged in your democracy, bring your issues to the table, keep the pressure on the boys. The boys forget, they get off into sort of practical land, but we have to make sure that we've got the care, the heart, the families at the centre of things. And I think that's a real core part of what female politicians can bring to the table. Having said that, I can be really tough too, and others. And we don't mind a fight every now and again if you have to.
I think that is entirely true, and I think it's really important that women are that step up and have a go. And what we speak about a lot in our programs is that not everyone, when they finish our course, realize that they want to step up and actually be the minister, but they can be your chief of staff. They can be
absolutely,
they can help in local community programs. So there are many different ways that we as women can get involved and take responsibility for our communities and help grow and transform the communities. It's really great to hear that a minister of your caliber on International Women's Day is driving her kids around in the morning.
I did the school run.
The school run, and that's the reality of our lives. I mean, from a personal perspective, I'm now upstairs in another room because my 1-year-old daughter is asleep in my office. So,
sleeping is good. When they're asleep, it's great.
Yes. I've got a question off the cuff here. If you don't mind me asking, how do you balance? You talk about the fact you've got 3 kids, you've got a dog, you've got a husband, you take on a lot of ministerialships. You've been in state politics for a long time. How do you balance it?
Yeah, well, I'll be really honest with you. If I wasn't the local member in the electorate where Parliament is, it would be much harder. So I have a head start. My house is not far away. At lunchtime, I can run out and back, and that makes life a lot easier. But my kids grew up running around Parliament House, so I would have them in and I just unleash them. And I taught them the rules to bow if you go in and bow on the way out. But they had the number for the bistro, they could order their food. And so they kind of grew up here running around doing that. Now they're older and they're familiar with it. And I just think it's a good part of their learning. But, my family, I remember growing up, maybe it's a Tassie thing, but being involved in parents' businesses and being around and, you'd learn through that way, and you can see where you could go by being engaged in your parents' lives.
Sure.
And, we all want to be together. So
sure. I think that's true of state politics and local politics. I think that's a reason why.
Canberra's harder, I think, because you have to fly to Canberra. Yeah. So I wouldn't do Canberra for me would be impossible.
Okay. So that's why you like to keep it local. So that's, another thing for our alums to think about within their lives. Where are they best placed? Where will it work effectively for them and their family?
That's right. And that could be around timing as well. If your kids are still young, then, closer to home is easier. And things change as you get older and kids form their own relationships and careers and move out.
So I think this is very apt also for International Women's Day. I know it's happened to me many times. I know it's happened to our CEO, Lysia Heath, many times. But throughout your career and in your personal life, have you experienced gaslighting and negativity around your pursuit and commitments to gender equality? You want to know your best comeback responses.
Oh my goodness. The best comeback response to anything that is that's misogynistic or mean or nasty, it's just pure success. It's being better. It's delivering outcomes. It's pointing to your space sector that you developed or the road that needed to happen. Success is the solution to everything. It makes you feel better. And, they just have to like it or lump it. I have to say, during my commercial career, which was very much in engineering sectors, I didn't really experience that sexism stuff. I didn't really know what it was about because I didn't have that experience. I was with engineers and they're quite conservative and very polite, and they were always very welcoming. And I rode the gender equality wave of telecommunications. They were expanding Telstra had programs. So I was really fortunate in that, and I'd give them great credit. But it was a big eye-opener for me in politics when I saw it, the old boys, and the aggression with which they can deal with things. So I think I sometimes hear myself speaking to them as if they're across the chamber, toddlers, if I'm allowed to say that, because once you've raised a few kids, you know the dynamic. But again, I'll always try and be careful and balanced and well-mannered. It's hard sometimes, and So I think that's my mantra. I say to myself, succeed, deliver, point to what you can do, and then where's the argument? You know,
I think that is fabulous advice. That is really great advice. Thank you. Lissy, our CEO, has a wonderful question. Lissy, would you like to take yourself off mic and ask?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Madeleine. Look, it's just that, you know, we get to train 1,000 women a year, really, and almost without fault, the question we get asked the most is, should I run for a party or should I run as an independent? Stuck. They get stuck. And they want our advice, and we can't advise them. Is the short answer.
Rules of the road. Yes.
But I can see them get frozen about not taking the next step because they can't solve that particular piece for them. So what advice would you give them?
So the answer to that obviously is very different depending on individual circumstances. But one thing I always tell my kids is just pick something. Just take the next step forward. Don't get into that circle of, I can't decide, and then do nothing. So pick something. Pick what you think is the best option. Nobody's going to fault you if you change. Change is okay. So you can choose one pathway, it can morph into another. Now, as it happens, weirdly, I'm a real party person. I like the people side of it, and I like the energy and intellectual rigor that comes with working through the party system. And then there's some practical things. If you're running as an independent, I ran once as an independent, it's hard and expensive, and you're very much on your own. So I think depending on what you want, and if you're running for council, running as an independent probably is a good idea. But if you're running in major elections like a federal election or major state election, I think it'll be very, very difficult to do it as an independent. Even the teal movement, not fully independent. So there's collaboration, and that gives that team environment. So I think we are naturally drawn to working with each other. And so for me, it's party land, but pick something and take the next step, and don't be scared.
I think that's great advice. I think that the concept of just pick a lane and go for it. And, you know, you can see within Parliament, once you're in, there are ways to move. And really, you're there to represent your electorate. You're there to represent the people you in.
Yeah.
So sometimes you do have to step away from a party in order to do that properly.
Yep. Things can happen. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Things can happen. Yeah.
I'm just putting it out there. Does anyone else have a question that they'd like to ask Madeleine?
I'll quickly ask one. Sorry, this is in the background. Hi, my name's Katja. I'm actually based in Canberra, which is an interesting kind of dynamic. I just wanted to ask you about any advice or any experience that you have, or strategies way of dealing with it. Just with obviously running as a party candidate, and even pre-selection in parties can get quite personal quite quickly.
Absolutely.
And I guess obviously that's can take quite a toll on somebody. And I just wanted to know if you had any advice about how you dealt with it personally, or
Sure. I really, really don't like the mudslinging, and there is a lot of that. It's horrible. And my view is it needs to be completely eradicated from our political life. And we need to start by sorting out what happens in the chamber, because that's the exemplar of that rhetoric, and it's bad. And then what happens in the back rooms as well. I don't know how you solve that personal attack stuff. It seems to bubble up, and you get subjected to it, and then it can move on. But I think part of it is a pushback from the community to say, that's unacceptable. Our expectation is that you're there to deliver for us, not to be attacking each other individually. And then within parties, it's hard work, but you got to find your way, and it is really hard to stay centered when those things happen. The other thing too, I had some really good advice from an old player in the system, and he took me out to lunch and he sat me down when I was having to make these big decisions about where did I fit on the spectrum, and he said to me, just don't keep grudges, just don't do it. And it's really hard not to, but it's great advice, because politics moves so quickly. You have to be quite agile, and you have to be able to deal and work with people. So pre-selections, you might lose out one time, but if you don't muck up and you're a decent person, you'll get it next time. So play the long game. I think that's the answer.
That's really great advice. Thank you so much.
I think that's why we do what we do, Madeleine. We need to get, I think the big teal sweep was very much evidence of we want to change in the way people are treated in Parliament. We want to change in
the discourse.
And I have to tell you that I was living overseas for 11 years. And when I came back to Australia and put on the ABC and started watching Question Time, I'd gone from kind of an early 20s into my early 30s and progressed in my career. So I had a different vision of how you treat people.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
And I was absolutely shocked.
It's embarrassing.
It's embarrassing. And then you send your kids to kindergarten. And
federal level. I'm telling them.
These, they are not allowed to behave this way in a kindergarten. I would get called by the head of the kindergarten if my child said any of the number of things that are thrown around, particularly in federal parliament. But I think you can see, particularly in this latest federal parliament, for instance, that there is a bit of a shift in Question Time. There is a bit of a shift in the way people are treating each other.
To raise the tone.
To raise the level of debate, to debate around policy, not how Leah Gillard's jacket is or how her hair is.
I know.
I think slowly it's changing, and I'd like to think that we've played a little small part.
I hope you have.
And having women like you in our state politics is fundamental to ensuring that this shift is sustainable, and that we have more women with lived experience who will come into this with a different kind of perspective and a different way of relating to people. And that's what we need. And I applaud you for that. So thank you for commenting on that. And continuing to behave in that way, because that's what we need. As a parent, you lead by example. So
that's right.
That's all you have at the end of the day.
Yeah. Correct. You have to do your best. And look, and everybody can lose their cool and things can happen. But in the main, I do feel that the discourse and tone at federal parliament has improved.
Yes.
I think that shows that we could do it at state level as well. So I'm very supportive of that work.
Licia also had another very interesting question. Licia, did you want to?
Yeah, this will be my last question. I note that Tassie is the only state and out of the territories as well that doesn't have a fixed date for its state election.
Yep.
Is that on the agenda? I mean, the federal election is obviously similar in that way, but is that on the agenda to change or to lock and load?
No, so there is a bit of flexibility there, and I haven't heard any suggestions to change to a different system, but we generally know what the duration will be. I think there is it is healthy to allow a government to determine when to have their election, because things can change, the economics can change, external factors, etc. So it's an interesting question, but I think probably the system's not going to change soon. At least I'm not hearing that debate.
So, Madeleine, where would you like to see your future in politics?
Oh, well, I thought I might be reaching the tail end of, I've been at it for a decade. So,
okay.
No, I don't know. I think we've got a lot of work to do here for a really small state. That's not a hugely wealthy state. We're not New South Wales. We're not like West Australia. They've got all those gold bars over there. So we have to do a lot with what we've got. I'd really like to do more to bed down the sectoral work we're doing with the tech sector, get that happening. And I'm doing some work across the heritage portfolio, which is really interesting as well, to try and take people think about Tassie as a beautiful place with the old buildings and they want to come and visit. But we actually need to do more about caring for our history and heritage. And it's a little bit sort of, dry, but I love that side of things. So I think that's the next hill to climb for me. How do we place a true economic value on our heritage sector and build that into the Tasmanian story? It's been a nice way to sort of circle right back, of course, because my convict ancestor fashion thief girlfriends from back in the day went through these places with the female factory and arriving in Tasmania, and that connection and how we do things in a small island state is very important to everybody. So, and I'm getting older. So I'm 54 now. Kids are getting older. They, at university, one at uni and one still in high school. So I can see a time in the next 10 years where it might be time to do something else. But so far, so good.
Great. Dominique, did you want to take yourself off mic and ask your question?
Thanks, Kaylee, and thanks, Madeleine, for your time today.
Yeah, pleasure.
And my first question is, when will Tasmania get an AFL team? but we'll park that for a moment.
Go Swans.
Go Swans, you bet. Sorry, Alicia and Carly. My question is actually about voter education.
Yes.
Look, we're all informed, we all understand our respective systems, but how can we, or more importantly, do the Tasmanian people understand how to vote? Because we're about to have a state election in New South Wales with optional preferential voting. And I'm trying to explain it to people to say, don't waste your vote, vote properly. Yep. But generally, do the populace understand in Tasmania? Yeah. Is that an issue?
Such a great question. Yeah, I actually think our system, so our Hare-Clark voting system, which is proportional representation and preferential voting. So basically, you can vote from 1 to 30 if you want, and track your vote all the way down and work out who will get cut up. And people get really into this from a statistical perspective, but the Tasmanian population is really tuned into that. And anytime anybody suggests changing it, they'll be marching in the streets down on Parliament lawns. It's like really engaged. And I think it's really healthy for Tassie because our people are super engaged, and there's something for everyone, of course. So when you have a system like that, you'll get a raft of characters and people, and from Greens through to Liberal and Labor and Independents. It's a fun time, and people sort of enjoy the spectacle of all of that. So I think, so for us, I think highly engaged population, and people understand how that voting works. I think it would be much harder perhaps in a much larger state. So that could be challenging. But I do know also our multicultural community, which refreshes all the time. We do quite a lot of work in making sure we bring them on the journey. Yeah,
that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. We have the school kids in all the time too.
I wish we did that here. Do we do that here? I don't think anyone does it in
New South
Wales. No.
So we bring them in. We bring them into Parliament, the school group. So every school comes through. We show them around the chamber. They can watch a debate. I always try and encourage everybody to do law, and then they roll their eyes and go off and have lemonade.
Terrific. Thank you.
We do. So Dominique, there is, through the public schools, I imagine the private schools do it too. I'm sorry, my experience in the public school system, they go to Canberra in grade 6.
Yeah.
But I don't know at a state level. I've never heard of visiting.
They probably do it. Who knows?
Licia, do you know?
Yes, there's the odd school trip, but I don't think it's quite as ingrained in the culture. So that's what Tasmania probably enjoys. And I agree, that's healthy for democracy.
Yeah. Everybody gets a little taste early on.
Yeah, I think if we can get young people engaged, I know it's something that I'm very interested in, is going into universities and getting young women engaged. And so that they understand they don't have to be the MP. There are many different ways that they can contribute to their communities and their society, and use their skills and their education in a really profound
and have a voice.
And have a voice, exactly.
Yeah. have influence.
And influence, exactly. Well, I want to thank you so much, Madeleine. It has been
So
such
great.
an engaging and lively and wonderful conversation. I've always enjoyed connecting with you.
Thank you.
I wish you the best of luck and thank
Stay
you.
in touch. Happy
Yes,
to-
we'll stay in touch. We'll definitely stay in touch and thank you for your service. And I just have a few plugs before I leave. We have a, sorry, I have to change my screen. We have our masterclass on social media. So on media and social media coming up on the 15th of March with Charlotte Motlock and Roger Christie. And I can tell you that's going to be incredibly engaging and wonderful for our alums. We also have the Next Equip course running from the 30th of March and the 30th of April. And then we have a masterclass in preferences on the 26th of April. So I'll keep adding the links to the chat there. But thank you again. Thank you everyone for joining us. Happy International Women's Day.
Thanks, everybody.
And we look forward to seeing you all soon. Madeleine, thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day.